Well, hey, my friends, you're going to notice that things are a little different. We are not having youth this week. We are actually going out and going to do a scavenger hunt collecting canned foods for a food pantry that is in our community. And so I am going to kind of wing this lesson right now, but I hope you sit there and enjoy it. And I hope this reaches people who may be wondering if they're ever going to walk through the doors of a church again. One of the things that's really hit me in the last 6 months is I have been talking to people who have told me flat out that they are not going to go back to church. And I've talked about this in some of the lessons preceding this one, actually, to my youth group. They have been hurt by a leader in the church, or the church itself they just feel is not where they need to be because of how they may be viewed, right? I talked to one who had told me that he hasn't gone to church because of a past hurt that his grandmother had. So we're looking at generational hurt. This hurt was so bad to the grandmother that she passed it down to the next her son or daughter, and it was passed down to the grandson. And this just shows how one person or a church, an organization, can steer you away from the greatest thing that you can have, and that is the eternity of living in heaven forever, right? Just that salvation that we can get from that. And so I wanted to share a story where I was really close to walking away from the church. Now, when I say walk away from the church, I don't mean Jesus. I've never, ever kind of lost that. But I was totally lost with the church as an organization. I was working at a church. I was working in kids ministry. And when I started there, it was great. It was all gung ho, and I was working. And the guy who hired me, who was the children's director, hired me. We got along well, but he went to go plant a church of his own, and they brought in another director. Well, this director and me were polar opposites. And I could see that early on that everything I seemed to do aggravated this person. And it just drove it. She was what I call an occupier. She liked to occupy time, and I'm more of a relational. And we would constantly butt heads. But I would always tell her, if we could combine what we were doing, we would have a great thing, because we are covering both kind of angles of how teaching, I feel, should be. But this person was more of a micromanager and a manipulator. And so that type of personality really wants things done their way. And if you're kind of going off on your own, which I really didn't do, but it seemed that way, it put that person into chaos. Now, I'm not criticizing that. We were just polar opposites. But the longer I was there, which I didn't feel called out. I've felt called out of a church before and moved to another church and got into the ministry there. I felt called to come to this church, but I wasn't feeling called to leave. But I did feel this definite separation between the two of us leaders, right? And so it kind of came to a head one time when COVID was rampant and we were coming back to the office. And I could tell there was something up, because I was just being treated really differently by all the lead staff. And so I was called into a meeting with this director, and she hands me a paper and says that this is my new job description. And her words were really odd to me. She hands it to me and says, "I hate giving you this." And I asked her why. And she said, because I could do none of it. And I looked at the list, and I've been doing ministry for 25, 30 years. And everything on that list, I was actually doing at the time. And so when I got that paper, I knew that it was kind of my pink slip, that I was going to be fired. Well, it took them another 2 weeks to finally come out and say, yeah, we don't think that you can do anything on that paper, and I was told that I couldn't learn anything on that paper, and that they were not going to invest in me to keep going. And so I was hurt by that, but I still really, it was like just a step, right? I was going to maybe move on into a different path in the church, maybe get into the men's ministry, even if it wasn't working. It was just attending. When you get into kids ministry and youth ministry, a lot of your time can get taken by that, and you don't get to associate with adults as much as you would like to, which is not a bad thing, because I chose the ministry, or the ministry chose me. And I don't mind that so much, but this was an opportunity for me to be fed with adults, right? And so I went to a couple of the leaders who let me go, and I asked the question, I'm getting a vibe that I'm not welcome here. And basically the answer is, yeah, you're not welcome here. And so I was really hurt. I couldn't understand what I had done to get actually booted from this church, to not be welcome from the church. And that leads me back to what we talked about last week, right? We talked about the prodigal son and the invitation that God gives us. But if you notice in the prodigal son, he never felt unwelcomed in his home. He was the one that had the pull to go someplace else. And yet his father wanted him to stay in the farm. And when he burned the bridges of burning all his money and coming back, and he thought he had burned the bridges with his relatives, his father, his brother, and dad comes out in that amazing show of affection by wrapping his arms around him and hugging him in that moment, is amazing. And when we don't feel welcome, when something goes wrong, when the person in the church that you trust the most comes out and says something that you're not welcome here, I kind of took that as this bash on me from the whole church, right? And I mean every church, right? I don't care about denomination. I don't care about pastors. I was talking about the whole church in itself. Was like going, well, if this church doesn't see me as a viable fit to just even attend their church, why do I even want to attend a church, period? I don't need to go through that. I can, because of COVID, we got into the realm of watching church on TV, right? We were streaming services. Even if it was your church service, you were streaming services a lot. And so you were watching. I actually got into the habit of watching 2 to 3 streaming services from different pastors from all around the country before I would even go to church. And then I would go to work, do my job in the kids ministry and the youth ministry. I didn't really get to see our pastor's services, but I would come in on Monday, and that's the first thing I would do was watch that service. So I was streaming multiple things. But at the time, I was just streaming these services, and I said, this is how I'm going to get my Jesus, right? But I really was struggling, and I am a very outgoing person. COVID really was a detriment to me. I hated COVID because being the outward, just talkative, want to be amongst people, it really was, I hated it because I wanted to be out with people, with kids, teaching and doing my thing. Where my wife is kind of the opposite. She's more subdued and likes the privacy and likes to stay secluded at home. And so COVID was actually more of a joy for her because, we married, we're kind of opposites, and I think that's why we attract so well. But it was crazy to sit there and think that I was not welcome in the church. So I had no plans of ever getting back to church, and I definitely wasn't going to get back into working for a church, because if the leadership can't see value in people, I didn't want part of that. That's not how I see the Bible. That's not how I see Jesus. I see Jesus as all welcoming. And I hope you do too, because I was sitting at home one day and a person out of the blue that I hadn't talked to in years. It had been 4 or 5 years since I had talked to this person, really, and just got a phone call and said, hey, there's a church that could use your talents, that could really use you. And so that began the wheels of motion in my heart and in my soul and in my brain, and just thinking, is this something I really want to get into? I prayed hard about it. She gave me the number to this pastor of this church that I work with now, and we got on the phone and talked for a while. And so I came in for an interview, and I just sat down and talked. And as we talked, I could feel just this embodiment of I belong. I do belong, and I'm valued here. Even though I didn't know if I was going to get the job, I could feel that I was missing out on the companionship and the community of going to church. And guys, that's the part of church that when you sit there and say, I'm never going back to church, that is what you're going to be missing. You can, if you give up on the church as a whole, you're missing out on the people of the church. Listen, there are bad leaders out there. And we need to understand that they're human, right? I have nothing against the past leader. We were just opposite. We were eventually going to not see eye to eye. Oil and water don't mix, and at some point you just got to separate it, right? And that's what I saw. We just needed to separate. I did not expect the church to just say, hey, bye, leave, go. We don't want you here. I was not expecting that. And so truly hurt to the core, but I felt that pull, that tug. And guys, God has a way of doing that in our lives. He has a way to grab a hold of us and steer us in a direction, guys. And I hope that as you watch this, I hope this is a steering to you. I want you to know that there are a couple verses that really stand out to me about this. And one is Romans 10:12, and it says, for there is no difference between Jew and Gentile. The same Lord is Lord of all, richly blesses all who call on him. This goes back to, listen, she's this way and I'm this way, but God calls us all to work together, all to be together. He invites all of us to be with him in community, with him, with each other. Guys, one of the things we're doing here at our church this week, and I told you earlier, our kids are going out to collect food for our food pantry in our community. And it's a way for our group to see the value of helping people, but it's also a way to raise up your community, because our food pantry feeds just our community and surrounding area. And these people need the help. And how would it feel if somebody comes in and says, listen, I need help, no matter their background, no matter their beliefs. If they come in and sit there and say, listen, I lost my job. I've got 2 kids at home. My wife doesn't work. She's a stay-at-home mom, and we have no income right now. And we just don't have enough to put food on the table. And if the food pantry goes, well, sorry, we just aren't going to serve you. You would never want to deal with that organization again. So guys, I want you to know that this is a place, the church is a place that you can come and be yourself. Be who you are. It says in Acts 10:34-35, then Peter began to speak. I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism, but accepts from every nation, the one who fears him and does what is right. Right? We are all equal. We are all together in this. We're working together to get people to heaven, right? That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm trying to do. And it says if we believe in who Jesus is, we can come together as a community of saints and get to know him better and love him. But it's about looking at the people in your community, in your region, in your state, in your country, as people who you can love. And I sit there and I struggle when I hear people sit there and say they can't go to church because of this. We see it too with how people are so divided in all these different things like politics and race and everything, right? There's no right or wrong here. It is about love. Jesus says, listen, you don't have to agree on everything, but you are to love your neighbor. And when you sit there and say words like hate and say words like, I can't do this with you, or I don't want you, how can that person feel welcome at all to the things that you want them to believe in? There's no dialogue. There's no conversation. And so it tears the fabric apart. It just keeps stretching and stretching until we start to rip, and then there's no fixing it. Guys, as a community, as a state, as a nation, as a world, we need to start coming together in the name of Jesus. John 3:16 says that God, if you believe in Jesus, you won't perish. God sent his son to earth to die on the cross. We're getting ready to celebrate this for Easter, right? We're getting to celebrate. And the word celebrate seems so wrong, to sit there and say that Jesus is going to carry his cross to his death. They're going to nail him to this cross and he's going to suffer and die on the cross. We sit there and say Good Friday and celebrate. And these words sound so oxymoronic, right? To say this about the death of somebody. But Jesus willingly took on the cross. And as he was on the cross and he was suffering and he was dying, he took all the sin of the world upon himself to free us from the bondage of our sin, to free us for the ability to have salvation. And in that moment after he received all that sin, he said, it is finished. And with that, he breathed his last. And then he was put into the tomb. He was rolled, the rock rolled in front. We know the story. On the third day, he rose again. He paved the path for us to get to heaven. We'll talk more about this in the coming weeks. But guys, understand, you're always welcome in the church. Hey, if you don't have a church and you live in the area I live in Goddard, and you're looking for a place that just will love you no matter what, come to our church, come to our youth group, come to our kids ministry, and just all you have to do is come and see. Come and see. We will love you, we will cherish you, and know that you are always welcome in these walls. So guys, I just want to thank you for this time. I know I'm kind of ad-libbing and just kind of going all over the place, but my heart is truly in saying that you are welcome in the church. You are welcome in the kingdom, and you are welcome to know who Jesus is, because he loves you and wants you to be with him in heaven. He wants you to know who his Father is. He wants to fill you with the Holy Spirit. So guys, I'm just praying for you in this time, and I hope you understand this again. You are welcome here. Bye.